retirement is not the end. You know, it's a beginning of another life, isn't it? It's not the time that we will just be sleeping and sleeping and sleeping. There are people that what they discovered in their retirement age, they did not discover it when they were younger and working. So tonight, the Lord is going to speak so much into your life, and you are going to take notes. I believe we all have our writing materials here, because we're going to be given information that we cannot get elsewhere. Now, somebody had been invited to speak to us tonight, but unfortunately, the person is unavoidably absent. But then the Bible says we must be ready in season and out of season. And in our own house here, the Lord has brought someone to us that is going to enlighten us tonight. And the person, of course, is no other person than our own, psychedelic pastor, our lovely pastor, and of course, you know who I'm talking about. So tonight, we're going to enjoy what the Lord has deposited in our pastor, Pastor Funmi Sofekun tonight. And she's going to speak, amazing things that will help us tonight. Praise the Lord. Up, girls!
God bless you, Pastor. Please, you may all be seated. The one I wanted out of all of those was our pastor, not the... But thank you very much, Pastor. I appreciate you. And thank you very much, everyone who's here tonight. As you all know, I'm not a retiree. And I'm not a retiree yet. But I'm actually going to show us a definition that does indicate that actually you can be a retiree before you get to that age that people talk about. One thing I wanted to do before even going into that was share with you a couple of messages that I've had between last night and this morning. I probably will read just one to you, and it will encourage you, because I know that those of you who have been here every day have been enriched by the day. And the message was, really blessed last 2 days. I felt like going to spend a weekend with Reverend Oma, just hanging out, helping her, and picking nuggets of wisdom. She is so real. And then they wrote WYSIWYG. Does everyone know what WYSIWYG is? Capital W, WYSIWYG. Do you know what it means? I knew it many years ago. When we were in university, we used to do WYSIWYG. I had to rack my brains, then I Googled it. What you see is what you get. So what she was effectively saying was that Reverend Oma is so real, what you see is what you get. All of us in this house know that anyway. She tells you as it is. But we thank God for the program so far. And we thank God that because He has purpose that we're going to share on planning for your retirement, whether or not the party who had planned to be here, who's now unavoidably absent, is here, God has purposed that we will get that knowledge in any case. So I'm sharing with you this evening, not as a retiree, because I don't have that full experience, but as someone who has also had to give some thoughts to what would I do when I get to that stage of retirement. And therefore, can I just check whether or not Elder Charles is somewhere up there? I'm not quite sure what's going on. Forgive me. In any case, if they are not ready there, today what we're going to cover, we will look at what retirement is. We will look at the legalities. We will look at when you should start planning for your retirement. We'll look at what your plans should cover. We'll look at some practical steps of things you can do. And then we'll also look at some of the resources that you can tap into. So very quickly, the Oxford English Dictionary defines retirement as the action or fact of leaving one's job and ceasing to work. And whilst it says leaving one's job, I recognize that some people will be in paid employment, some people will actually run their own businesses. But the reality is that it relates to age and activity. So leaving your job may be occasioned by your age, you're advanced in years, your body is not the same, physical strength is not the same. Or it may well be that you're involved in a certain type of activity. So you hear most times when they say a sportsman is retiring from that sport. He's retiring from that activity, but they're not necessarily that advanced in age. They're probably advanced in age for that sport from the perception of a man. So the definition of retirement is leaving a job and ceasing to work. But you know, you can also be in that position if you are made redundant. There are people who go through redundancy and very quickly degenerate into a phase where you're not necessarily thinking about being active. And I would have some advice for us all on that front, not to think about retirement just as retirement when you get to a certain age, but also to consider it from a redundancy perspective. Just want to look at one or two legalities. So in the UK, there used to be something called the retirement age. The retirement age used to be age 65.
Est-ce qu'on peut acclamer la parole de Dieu? Ok, merci, nous pouvons nous asseoir.
The retirement age, we are here. Maybe that's interference. The retirement age used to be age 65, but that was scrapped in 2011. And what that means is you can work for as long as you want to. I know that the department up there are struggling to put up the slides. If they don't put them off before I finish, I will make sure that they provide copies for you to take away, because obviously you can't write the full notes. So that law was scrapped in 2011, and what it means is that in the UK, you can actually work for as long as you want to work or you are able to work. Sometimes people ask me that, does it mean my employer can force me to stop working, though, at a certain stage? Because sometimes people get to 70 and they want to continue working. Your employer cannot actually force you to stop working or retire early. The only conditions under which they can force you to retire early are if your job requires, and it would have been specified up front, if it requires you to have a certain level of mental or physical abilities. So if your job was quite physical and you had to lift heavy pieces of equipment or otherwise, you get to a stage in life with age where you're not able to do that. You may not even be able to do that at a young age for a host of other reasons. But the other condition under which you can be forced to retire early is where an age limit has been set by another law. But otherwise, you can work for as long as you want to work. So the question is, when should we start planning for our retirement? And I think the best way to look at that is to take a view about, or try and visualize yourself when you get to that stage or age where physically you may not be able to do so much, and think about how you would like to live your life. What would you want to have? You probably want to have an income of some sort to be able to enjoy your retirement. You don't want to have been comfortable in your normal life for the first 60 or 65 or 70 years of your life because you have an income, and then suddenly you get to this stage where you stop working and you feel like you are in a poverty trap. You need to be thinking about, how am I going to survive in this time? And the one thing I always want to think about, and we should think about, is that some of us may have children, but those children are growing up and they are also starting their own families. So we shouldn't assume that they are the ones who are supposed to sustain us throughout the rest of our days, because they also need to be building their families. The Bible commands us to look after our parents and to honor them, and they will do that. But it would be overly burdensome to assume that your children will cater for your every single need. If they have the means, that is great, but none of us should become a burden to our children. So you'd want to think about the level of income that you need to have to enjoy your retirement. You also need to think about debt. So you could have a mortgage. If you're young here today, I will advise you to take out your mortgage as early as you have the means to do it. Because really, if you took out a mortgage when you're about 20, 25, 22, let's say 22, between 22 and 25, by the time you get to 50, you should have paid off your mortgage. You don't want to go into retirement with debt. Because if you go in with debt, you're under pressure. Your income stream is not the same as it was when you were working. And the fact of the matter is that every day that we live, we have to still spend money. So if you're spending money and nothing is coming in, or the right level is not coming in, you do feel, you can feel miserable, let's put it that way. You also need to think about an inheritance. What do you want to leave to your children? So if you're thinking about that, you start thinking about, when should I now start planning all of this? What do I want to leave for my children? I don't want to leave a house that's got debts on it, so that when I pass, my kids are kicked out. Apart from that, what are we going to provide so that our children actually have a good footing to start from in life? And if you look at people in this country, and not everybody grew up here, most of them will pass something on to give their children a leg up when they come out of university. So we also should be thinking about, what is it we're going to leave for our children? You also should be thinking about, how will I ensure I have good health in my old age? When I've retired, how will I ensure that I can live a healthy life? I spoke to someone about 2 weeks ago who said, I actually take about 14 supplements every day. And I thought, 14 supplements? But by the time, the pharmacist is laughing, but by the time they counted the one for iron, the one for bones, the one for vitamin D, so that you minimize, I can't remember what you minimize with vitamin D, but the pharmacist will know that. Anyway, she listed all of them, and it all made sense. The fact of the matter is that the older you grow, your metabolism is slower, no doubt, but also your bones, your organs, your skin, everything has a pattern that it has to follow. So in your working life, she was probably able to afford those 14 supplements. Maybe when she gets much older, she needs 14 or 16, I'm not quite sure. But if that was what she was using, then she probably wants to think about how she can continue with those supplements. You don't want to get to retirement and then you can't continue with the things that put you in that good place. You may also want to think about your location. So where do you want to be when you retire? Some people want to go abroad. Some people want to remain where they are. Some people want to travel the world. Because when you're working, you're thinking about here and now, the kids, they need to grow up. We need to pay these bills. We need to do all of this. Everybody thinks about retirement and thinks, oh, that's paradise. So it's going to be paradise, but we'll come back to that. So you need to think about things like your location. Where would you want to be? Does that require an investment or otherwise? So these are only some of the things to consider. But when you consider all of these, the question is, so when should you start planning for your retirement? And I would say that the day that you become conscious that there is something called retirement that is coming, on a day or at a time where you will not be able to work as hard as you've been working in your early years, you need to make provision for that. So I would say to the young people, as I started earlier on, you may have bought your first house, but are you thinking about investment in other properties? Are you thinking about investment in other things? It could be stocks, it could be new businesses, lots of entrepreneurs coming up these days, lots of crowdfunding. Are you thinking about where you put those resources? Because if you're conscious of it, then every time you think about, oh, there's that, what's the hairstyle they do? The young people, how much do you spend on hair? Every time you want to go and do your hair, you think about, actually, I've got a focus and there's something I'm working towards. So you can actually put some of your resources in that. I'm not suggesting that you won't do the hair you want to do. I'm not suggesting that you won't be smart, you won't do the normal things you do at that stage, but you will have a consciousness that you've got to prepare for this time. One of the things I always say is that, people take out pensions, and a pension is a good thing. The country promotes it. Your employer most times will pay something into it. So if they're paying into it, why would you not take it? But also be conscious that a pension is subject to someone else managing those funds. And a lot of it is dependent on, one, the fund manager's own judgment, but also what's happening within the environment. And I've seen people who, by the time they got to retirement, having put in so much into their pensions, ended up almost penniless. So that argues for you to look at a diversified portfolio. And I know that there are quite a number of people who take the view that I'd rather invest in something that's solid, that's going to give me regular income in my retirement. If you're not young and you get to age 50, I always say, well, for me anyway, when I got to 50, the realization dawned on me that, you know what, you probably have 10 active years of working. Because I don't want to be working after 60 like I'm working now. So in those 10 years, I have to maximize the opportunities that I have so that I can provide for the long term. Because I don't know how long I'm going to live. The Bible says God will satisfy us with long life, salvation. But if you're going to live long, you have to think about how you're going to sustain yourself for that long period of time. And research actually suggests that we're all living longer. It's just that it also talks about obesity and all the other problems that come along. And if you are already retired and you don't have a plan, the moment you recognize that you ought to have a plan, you ought to have thought about the things you would be doing in this time, then that is the time to start planning how do you take things forward from here on. Because for all you know, you may have another 20, 30 years to go. So I would say that you start your retirement planning years ahead. The moment you get the recognition or the understanding, you should start planning. There are lots of resources that you can tap into. But what are the things we should plan for? And all I want to touch on today are from 4 perspectives. I want to look at the financial perspective that we should plan for. I want us to look at the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual aspects. In terms of the financial, of course, when you get to the point where you're not earning as much and you can't work as much as you used to, you want to maximize your income and you want to reduce your costs. So some of the things I touched on, you consider investments. What should you be investing in? You want to consider also when it's coming up to retirement, how should I consider going about this? And I always advocate a phase to retirement. And by that I mean you can start winding down gradually. So you're probably doing 5 days a week. When you get to 65, you might decide that you start doing 3 days a week because you also still want to enjoy yourself. You want to do some things with your family. You want to gradually wind down so it's not go, 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 go forever. Do some of the things that God provided for us to enjoy. So you might consider a phased retirement. And from an employer's perspective, a lot of employers are quite keen to have experienced hands around. There was a different work ethic with a generation that is being phased out of the workforce as things currently stand. So most employers are still looking for some of the experienced people to train the younger ones who are coming through, but also people who can hit the ground running. So some of your options may well be step down to part-time. You can go 3 days a week. If you don't want to do part-time, you can actually look to negotiate a contract with your employer. So you can work as a self-employed contractor. You earn a lot more doing that. You've got taxes to pay, no doubt, but you've got a lot of flexibility. What that also means is that you can work with more than one employer, and you can actually even start providing so much more for your retirement. But you're working at a different pace that actually helps you in the long run. The other thing I think I touched on was around getting rid of debt. So if you've got debt and you recognize that you are coming towards your retirement, your focus should be, how can I pay that off? Or at least, how can I pay the maximum off? Not everyone would have had a mortgage when they were 25. It doesn't matter. But now that you have a mortgage, can you look at your income and minimize all of your other expenses so that you can afford to pay that mortgage off as quickly as possible so you don't have that pressure? And if you have other debts, you need to start considering, how do I pay those off? I also always think it's good to take an interest in different streams of income. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing 9 to 5, you're paid a salary. I haven't seen a billionaire who was made from salary, I have to be honest. And when you're thinking about times when you're not going to be able to move or work as hard as you could in your early years, you need to think about what are the sources of passive income that I can now start looking at. You know, the generation of, what are they now? They are not Y, generation, what are you? You are not generation Y, you are not generation X. You are even past millennials, you are not millennials. Millennials and the next generation, anyway, they don't want to go to work in anyone's office. Everybody has a side business. If they go and work and get experience. But at the same time, they have their own entrepreneurial business that they are doing on the side. And that's beginning to look at different sources of income. The key thing, though, is that when you have all of those side businesses, you have to be clear that it's not for the purpose of meeting your day-to-day needs. If you don't have a focus, you fritter the money away in any case. But when you start looking at opportunities where you can generate income when you are not there, or where you are asleep or otherwise, then you start providing in the long run. You could do it for 5 years, and by the time you retire, you actually have a steady stream of income that comes from that. It's the same thing you could do with a property portfolio. It's not to suggest that there aren't risks with any business. There are always risks with every business. But you at least have to do something or start thinking about something. The other thing is to think about is, what income are you entitled to? And a lot of this comes when you get to the point of retirement. In this country, there are all sorts of benefits that accrue to you. There is respect that accrues to you when you get to that stage. There are many people I know who can't wait until they get their freedom pass. But apart from that, there are lots of income opportunities for people who are older. So if you're not claiming any of those, you ought to go and have a look at what you're entitled to. You know, sometimes we get letters in the post. Sometimes people don't necessarily read them, or you read them and you think, oh, I'm going to do that next time, and you procrastinate. But for every day that you procrastinate, you're losing income that you would have been entitled to that would actually have helped you at that stage. So I would encourage everyone to look at and claim all the income that's due to yourself. I mean, at the end, I think I have some resources or places you can go to get information. The other thing to think about, if you are a professional, for example, is to think about developing a non-executive director portfolio. And I always say that this is useful depending on the field that you're working in. So if you're here and you're a pharmacist, you know the inside out of pharmacy. You have worked in a pharmacy, you probably understand management in a pharmacy and so on and so forth. So there may well be a pharmaceutical organization that always has to have people on its board or its subcommittees. There's absolutely no reason why you cannot be on the board of an organization. So you should look at those opportunities. Lots of organizations are trying to encourage women to come onto their boards. Lots of organizations are looking for young people on their boards, and lots of organizations are looking for people from ethnic minority backgrounds on their boards. So I would suggest that you take advantage of those. The reason I say start thinking about a portfolio is that you start with one. And when you are not working and you've got experience from one, the next board that's looking for someone, you already have experience that you can share, because it's a catch-22 situation. Usually they're looking for someone who has got board experience. So an entry point, I always say, is you can volunteer to be on a charity board, which would mean that you're a trustee. You may not be paid to be on your first board appointment, but you've got to get the experience for you to be able to go on to other boards. You can also be a school governor. Essentially, what people are looking for is, do you have experience from the other side, from the governance side? Do you understand governance and all of those kinds of things? So you can look into creating a portfolio. There are a lot of professionals who these days really just survive on a non-executive director portfolio. Some of them have 4, 5, 6, and depending on the type of organization, some of them will pay $40,000 a year, some will pay $13,000 a year, but you are not going to work every day. All you need to do, you need to read the papers, you've got responsibility, you've got to show up at all of the meetings, and then you've got to contribute from the experience that you've got. So I'd encourage you to look at that. You know, many years ago, when my mom was in her final years, she had a carer who was a Nigerian lady. And I remember that the first time I met that lady, you know, she spoke so eloquently. So I asked her a little bit about her background. Oh, it started from the point that, you know, my mom didn't want me to go out of the room. And the carer was saying, no, I should go out. All she's looking for is attention for this, that, and the other. But anyway, eventually I left reluctantly. And really, my mom fell asleep. So she said, it's understanding the psychology of what's happening with an elderly person. And we started talking about a couple of other things. And she said she studied economics in a university in Nigeria, and then she's done social care here in the UK. She did a course in social care. So I said, but you are doing frontline care. The government here is confused about how to square the circle on funding with social care. Every day we hear it in the news. You are on the front line. Intellectually, you can contribute to that. What you should be looking for is an opportunity either to get on a subcommittee of somebody in the local authority. Go on to publicappointments.com. You will find all of the government opportunities that are available for you either to be a chair or to be a board member on any of all these authorities. So I said to her, you ought to be contributing. You will be valued because you know what's happening at the coalface, but also you understand the theory and you also understand the practicals from a management perspective and from a policy perspective. So sometimes we undersell ourselves. We don't think about, the scope or the breadth of the knowledge and experience that we have. And that was how I pushed her in that direction. And she's actually doing a non-executive role now. I don't know whether she's gone for a second one, but once you've got one, you can get so many more. Okay, one of the other things you need to think about when you're thinking about financial, we had that on Monday, you've got to make sure you make a will. And Apostle has promised, for those who were not here on Monday, that the gentleman is going to come back on a particular Saturday. So when that gets announced, please make sure you avail yourself of the opportunity. And if Elder Charles is there now, maybe there is a very short clip that he might be able to show us on something that is offered from a financial perspective. If he doesn't show us, I'll just move on. So while they are preparing, when it comes on, I will stop. While they're preparing, the next thing we're going to look at is, we hear no volume. The next thing we're going to look at is...
Wouldn't it be nice if things got cheaper as we got older? But instead, as your income dries up, prices go up too. But thankfully, there's extra money to support pensioners on a low income, and Age UK can help you claim it. For instance, do you know about pension credit? Pension credit is a benefit older people may be able to claim to top up their income to a minimum level. You could be eligible to claim it if you don't have much money coming in. And pension credit doesn't only give you extra cash each week, it's also your way into lots of other benefits too. Once you're receiving pension credit, you may find you don't have to pay council tax anymore and get help with your rent or mortgage. You'll also get free dental treatment, help with the cost of new glasses, and extra payment when the weather is very cold. Age UK can help you get the money you're entitled to, and more importantly, what you deserve. You have nothing to lose by claiming, but potentially a lot to gain. For free advice on how to claim pension credit, visit ageuk.org.uk/claim pension credit.
You have a second one?
How to boost your income in retirement. We should all be able to enjoy our retirement. But sometimes, no matter how hard you try, it can be hard to make ends meet to cover every last thing, and money worries start to get on top of you. Age UK is here to help. And we've got lots of great free advice to make your money go further. Here are 4 things you can do to lighten the load. You could save money by switching your energy supplier. It's also a good idea to review all your direct debits and standing orders to check you're not wasting money there too. Do you still need them all? Next, don't just assume you're not eligible for any benefits. In fact, billions of pounds go unclaimed by older people every year. Finally, you can track down old bank accounts and premium bonds. And the government offers a free service to help you trace old pensions. For more free money advice, visit ageuk.org.uk/more money.
Thank you very much, Elder. The reason I showed those clips was that there were one or two things in both of them that I wasn't aware of. No doubt I'm not at that stage. But nonetheless, having seen them, I've now got them registered in my mind. And I do hope that there are one or two things that you've picked up from that and will be conscious of, and you will actually make the claims if you are at that stage where you're eligible to claim. So very quickly, we're going to look at some physical aspects. You know, one of the things I notice is that sometimes you retire and you think, actually, this is now paradise. I don't have to wake up early in the morning, rush out, all that up and down. But the reality is that the more you sit down, the more your body starts, I want to say degenerates, but I'm not quite sure that's the right word. But you've got the idea in any case. Just like a house. If you have a house that nobody lives in a short while, you start seeing cracks in the wall, everything starts falling apart. It's the same with this human body. So, from a physical perspective, when we get to this stage of retirement, we need to walk. And the advice is try and make sure you walk every day, even if it's 15 minutes that you walk for. If it means walking to the shops rather than getting the bus for one stop or otherwise, just walk. The other piece of advice is around our weight. And sometimes we have a lot of attempts that we're putting in trying to control our weight, but your weight actually has an impact on your overall well-being. And we also do know that, I mean, we see all the news about obesity and all of that, but if you're overweight, it starts causing other problems within your human body. So maintaining a healthy weight is one of the things that's encouraged. Some of the things you can do, learn a new language, because actually learning a new language keeps you sharp. I'm not quite sure if you all remember the video we watched last year about aging gracefully. And we watched the lady who was, I think, 69 years old and actually learned a new language, and they tested her abilities and found that that had increased significantly. Her cognitive abilities had increased significantly as a result of learning a new language, but also driving, actually, is what I think I remember. You can study and do a course. There are lots of free courses you can do here in the UK. And of course, we've got an example in the house, our father who hasn't stopped yet and is considering his PhD. I'd say also, before you get to the point of retiring, when you know it's coming up, because you'll have discussions with your employer, I always say take advantage of all of the training that's available, because every knowledge is useful. And if you know what it is you want to do when you retire, most employers will actually support you in terms of training you towards what you're going to do. I've said negotiate your private medical insurance through your employer before you leave. So if you've got private medical insurance with your employer, you actually can have a discussion with them about how you can continue on that at a discounted rate, even though you are no longer in the employ. So every benefit that you have, you actually can have a discussion. What you don't ask, you don't get. But if you don't ask, you don't know whether or not you can get it. But you do need the opportunities to look after yourself and look after your health as you grow older. And sometimes, you know, we've got facilities that are great, but sometimes you need quicker attention. And sometimes you don't get that with the facilities that we've got. So if you've got benefits, see what you can negotiate before you leave. I've said do something every day. I watched a short clip with a lady who said when she retired, she thought it was going to be bliss. But after about 3 weeks, you know, she sat up at 10 a.m. sipping her tea, and she just thought, so what next, actually? Is this all the hype that we've been building up to? What am I going to do? Because she retired without having a plan. And one of her resolutions was that every day she was going to do something. So she came up with 3 key things she was going to do in her retirement. She was writing a book, she wrote a magazine, and she wanted to go out and volunteer somewhere. And that meant she had constant interaction with people, which is one of the issues that a lot of people suffer when they get to that stage. Probably not necessarily in some communities we know, but more in others, because a lot of their networks are cut off. Technology is also a good thing to grasp. In this day and age, you need to be on top of what technology can do. So we cannot remain old school. If something's out there that you can use, learn how to use it. There are lots of places to go out to learn. I remember my mom at about 83, she said she was going for computer classes. I said, where? And then she said they've got something in the local authority that's called Silver Surfers. So you go there, They teach you how to write emails, how to use Skype so you can contact your family, all sorts of things. And I'm sure that there's so much more that's available. But you know, sometimes we take it for granted because we use all of these things and assume that others do. But if you don't, one, it cuts you out of all the opportunities that you can get to see through that. But two, it means that you're needlessly spending time. I don't know how many people still go to the bank every day or every week when you don't have to go to the bank and you can do it, you know, wherever you are, on the bus, at home, and so on. So grasp technology and embrace it is what I would suggest. It helps you stay current to and open doors of opportunity. I like this one about making intergenerational friends. So I want to have friends who are 15. The other day, they had the youth convention here, and they had the quiz. What was the software we used? I wrote it down. The software we used to do the polling. Is a gentleman here, Brother Obembe. What was it? Pardon? Kahoot or Kahoot? Kahoot, whatever it was, in any case. I thought, well, I'm going to start using that. But there are quite a number of apps that you can use for these things. But when you've got friends across generations, there's a lot of enrichment that you get from those experiences. And I always say also mentor. When you're mentoring younger people, they will learn from you, but you also learn from them. And it keeps you alive. It keeps you current with what's going on. You also can understand what's going on in their mind, so you can also impart into them. So make intergenerational friends and stay current and relevant. And I've said also, if you're a subject expert, an expert on a particular subject, you can actually lecture. I had one of my board members who at 90 was a visiting lecturer. And it was once in 2 weeks that she had to go and lecture, but it actually kept her alive. It kept her brain alive. It kept her alive physically. And you could see she was always looking forward to going to do that. She had family, but of course her children obviously had their own lives and wouldn't see her every week or every other week. So if you've got experience somewhere, you can actually give something back. So I'd encourage you to look at opportunities. There are so many more, but there's only so many I would go through. I've got a slide on walking because walking seems to be what's suggested as the easiest thing to do. And of course, walking helps you with weight loss. And brisk walking helps keep our heart strong. Of course, by increasing your heart rate, you can reduce the risk of disease. And physical exercise helps reduce the risk of developing cancer. A lot of researchers have come up with this, not myself. But walking also reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes, which is more likely to affect adults and those who are overweight. Walking can also help you strengthen your bones, and it also improves your mood and mental well-being. Actually, when you're walking out in fresh air, that actually changes your whole mood. So it's encouraged that you go out into the fresh air and walk, and it can also help reduce the risk of developing dementia. But very quickly, in terms of staying sharp, some of the things that we can do, we must remain active. We have the opportunity for regular checkups. When you get the letters, I would suggest that you did go. And there are some of the risk areas that are highlighted, but also eating a healthy diet. And I know that these days, many of us are conscious of a healthy diet. Some of us still don't adhere to them. But you know, sometimes when people tell you, oh, too much salt, you shouldn't eat too much salt. If they don't tell you that eating too much salt means that it will put your heart under pressure. Your heart has to work harder. Is that correct? I'm sure so. Yes, doctor, thank you. Your heart has to work. If you just said, don't eat too much salt, people don't understand why should I not eat too much salt. So you continue to eat salt until you understand it. And the earlier we understand it, the better. And the day you understand is the day that we should start. Eating a healthy diet, everyone proclaims the benefits of a Mediterranean diet, high fruit, vegetables, and so on and so forth. More fish and less red meat. People say it's linked to better brain health. I want my brain to be active and working 110% for as long as it can. Maintaining a healthy weight we've talked about. I've talked about taking up a new activity. Sleep is also important. So usually it's advocated that when you get to that stage of life, you probably want to sleep for at least 7 hours a day. And I'm sure that we all recognize that it makes a difference. So it's a time in life where you actually can strike the right balance without the pressures that you have in your earlier days. I'm just very quickly going to switch over to planning also for our emotional health. So I've talked about planning, having a plan for your financials, having a plan for the physical aspects of your life when you're planning your retirement. Emotionally, one of the things that happens to people when you retire is that your social circle actually diminishes very quickly. Because when you go out to work, you interact with lots of people in your workplace. Sometimes you're working in different client offices, so you're interacting with so many people. Suddenly, you stop, and all of that network is more or less cut out. You don't have that daily interaction that you've had for years. And some people can actually feel lost as a result of that. Some people feel that their own sense of worth is diminished, but I am sure that everybody in this auditorium does not derive their sense of worth from the work that they do. We know who we are in Christ Jesus, and we also have our own networks here. So that's a time where you can actually tap into the network you have here. I think I go on to another aspect of that on the next slide. But recognizing that you thought it was all going to be paradise. Oh, I've been working 40 hours a week or 50 hours or however many hours you've been working a week. Waking up early in the morning and suddenly, I'm actually going to enjoy. No rushing out. I can do what I want to do when I want to do it. If you don't have a plan, you'll enjoy it. Maybe 1 month, 2 months, maybe 3 months. I'm not sure. Go to all the events you want to go. And then there will be days you wake up. If you don't have a plan, you're asking yourself, so what am I even doing with myself today? And that actually emphasizes the point about having a plan. But it does have an emotional impact on us. And it's just being conscious of that ahead. And if you're conscious of that ahead, you can actually take control of your situation by having planned. I just want to touch very briefly on a spiritual aspect. I'm not quite sure who's there. So if I tell you these scriptures, if you could put them up for me, that would be great. So we've got to this stage of retirement. No rushing to work and then rushing to church and rushing home because I'm going to work tomorrow morning. You have all the time in the world. So it means that we can plan our time for God so much better. We have so much time to intercede. We have so much time to sit down and fall asleep and fall into a trance, or fall asleep and have those dreams. We have so much time. We can come for Shiloh Pillars meeting because we are not at work. We won't be late to church because we're not rushing from work. And at this time, we have so much more time. Not that we shouldn't focus on heaven while we are younger, but you have so much more time to meditate, to think, to reflect, to study. And this is a time where most people start thinking about heaven because you are getting closer to going home. So what should we be thinking at this time? The Bible says that in Psalm 92, verses 12 to 14, the righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like the cedar of Lebanon. Planted in the house of our Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age, and they will stay fresh and green. So that is a time that we have all the time. Every time you go on the bus, you are not rushing to a meeting. So we can spend those extra few minutes evangelizing that person who was next to us on the bus. The bottom line is that we can still bear fruit in that time, and we need to be much more conscious of that. You know, I started thinking this afternoon that actually that's the time you should start visualizing what your home in heaven is going to look like. And when you're thinking about that, you probably will reflect on how much work have I really done and how much more is there to do. Let me maximize the little time that is left. The book of Luke talks about Luke 2:37. Luke 2:37. We all know this. Luke 2:37. Oh, can we start from 36? Can we start from 36? You all know who we are talking about. There was also a prophet, Anna, the daughter of Penuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was very old. She had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then was a widow until she was 84. But she never left the temple, but worshiped day and night, fasting and praying. So it means that that is a time when we have, I'm not suggesting that everyone is called to be in the temple 24 hours. That was hers, but we have so much more time to spend in the temple. That's the reason why we have Annas in the temple, an opportunity for us to come to the house and pray. But the Bible also tells us, it's in our scriptures for this year, the book of Joel 2, verse 28, it talks about old men dreaming dreams. At that time, we are old. If we haven't been dreaming before then, that is an opportune time for us to dream dreams. I said it a few minutes ago. Fall asleep and enter into a trance or a dream. The Bible also commands that older women should teach the younger women. The book of Job, chapter 12, verse 12, says that wisdom is with the aged and understanding in length of days. So is not wisdom found among the aged? Does not long life bring understanding? So when you are older, you actually should be wiser. We also should be passing on of that wisdom to the younger generation. The Bible says we should impart what is good to the younger generation. So that is a time where you can start looking at, if I haven't impacted enough lives, what can I do to impact other lives? Which other children can I actually train? You know, we had a lecture on raising godly children. It's not just your biological children that you're raising. There are so many children who don't even have parents. There are others who have parents whose parents may not necessarily have what you have that you can impact into other people's lives. So that's a time where you actually want to be a good mentor. You're passing on good knowledge, something good. You are teaching something good. What is the song Reverend Oma sings? Tell me the stories of Jesus. I want to hear. I can't sing, but you know what I mean. That is the time to be telling the grandchildren and the children or the souls that are out there that you come across the stories of Jesus. What did Jesus do for us? We will have so much time at that point to be able to devote our time to all of the things that God wants us to do. I'll just switch very quickly to someone who had a legacy. The book of Titus, chapter 2, verses 2 to 3, we all know the story about who raised who. This is about teaching. Teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, and sound in faith. It applies to the women too, in love and in endurance. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to too much wine. You don't have it here. But to teach what is good. And what I was talking about was teaching what is good. But it also talks about older women being reverent in the way that they live. So it's not in old age that you should find a woman who is careless in how you talk, how you behave, how you react to people or interact with people. At that stage, gray hairs, you have understanding, you have wisdom, we have experience, and that's the time for us to pass on those good things to the younger generation. So some of the things we'll think about, how would you spend your time? And before that, what is the inheritance you will leave? The Bible says in the book of Proverbs 13:22, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So at that time, if you haven't done it, if you haven't got something you are going to pass on to your children, it's a good time to think about, what can I do in this space of time that I can pass on to these children? You know, when you have gone and the children are talking, they're the ones who should be saying every morning, you know, when grandma was here, she will ring the bell for prayer at 6 a.m. Whether you are sleeping or rubbing your eyes, you must stand in that place of prayer. So when you have gone, they will remember and they will continue those things. Is it something you've always said? Everybody knows Reverend Oma's legacy. I'm not looking at what people are wearing here today, but you know that if you are not dressed in a manner that is befitting and that will make God proud, she will corner you somewhere and she will tell you. Otherwise, people will say, don't let Reverend Oma see you with that. It's part of the legacy. Even the person who is guilty will make sure that they don't cross to the green room on that day. But it's part of what will you leave for your children. And also there's a point about being a blessing to your children and to your grandchildren. We also know in the book of Timothy, 2 Timothy 1:5, we know about how Timothy was raised by his grandmother and his mother, Eunice and Lois. And so for us also at that stage, there's an opportunity for us to help with raising our own grandchildren, but other little children who are in the house or other little children who are elsewhere. You know, some people have taken on the charge of fostering other kids. And in fostering other, you know, everybody has a different grace. So if you have the grace to do that and you are fostering another child, there's something that you can impart into those children at that stage where you're not struggling with what I need to do what I need to rush out to do today, tomorrow, or otherwise. So some of the things we need to consider from here are visualize your retirement. What do you want it to look like? How do you want to live? How are you going to provide for yourself? How are you going to ensure that you're not a burden to your children or to the church or to other people? Start planning from now. When you visualize it, you can then take actions. And then consider prayerfully, when you start thinking about what are the things I'm going to do. I've said so many things here. Some people want to foster, but you don't want to foster and have a different type of problem, do you? So you need to be sure about what it is you're going into. Should I invest in something? You need to consider it prayerfully. And then make a plan. And I don't think it's ever too late. As I said earlier, if you're young, you can start thinking about it now. And start thinking about what you can do over the next 25 years, for example, to ensure that you will be in a comfortable place when you get to that point. I'm not suggesting you retire at 50, by the way. Although I think the millennials will have retired before 50 with the rates at which they're going. And then, of course, there's something about tapping into all the resources that are available. All I've done on that next slide is that I've just signposted you to a number of places that you can go and get some information. Age UK, no doubt. They've got so much information. You have lots of local offices. It doesn't cost you more than an hour to go in and sit down and talk about what's available, get some advice on different aspects of life and what you can do. The Money Advice Service also provides information. You can look at lots of the free things that you can do in London, but there are all sorts of other sites. I talked about public appointments, publicappointments.com.gov.uk, I think it is actually. Or if you Google public appointments, it'll come up anyway, and you'll see all of the opportunities that are available. I talk a lot about women on boards, and it is a website, Women on Boards, and it essentially promotes all of the non-executive director roles. Some of them are in sport, some are in leisure. There are all sorts of, some of them are corporates, FTSE 100, and so on and so forth. Start somewhere. And if you don't want to go to those places and you feel you're not confident enough, go and start with your school. Which primary school did you go? Get on the board of governors. Which secondary school did you go? Is there an opportunity there? Contribute in one way, and then you can use that experience to get to the next level. There's also always a lot of information in your local paper, supermarket. The council. One of the things I didn't say when I was talking about exercise, a lot of people talk about dance being very, very useful in terms of keeping all parts of your body exercise. So some people dance naturally in front here with a lot of energy, but sometimes there's dance you want to dance that you can't use all your energy to, demonstrate here. But sometimes you have the local authorities that actually put out dance classes, and you can actually learn how to dance, and then you dance in your house. So use the resources that are available with the local authorities. Flower arrangements. Did I tell you the story when I just got married? 5 months after, my mother-in-law said, we were having a function, and she said, you arrange the vase of flowers. They had cut the flowers and put them inside on the table. We didn't have a garden, So I got there, I was perambulating. She gave me secateurs, the flowers were there, and the vase was there. And I was looking at the three of them. And I kept trying to arrange, but it didn't look like anything I had seen. So after about 20 minutes, she was passing by and came back again and said, you haven't arranged these flowers? It was difficult for me to say. I didn't even know that you need to cut them like this. I didn't know what you needed to trim off and how you needed to arrange them. But anyway, I survived that one then. But when I came to England, I found that all these local authority booklets, they put them through your letterbox, don't they? Either every 6 months or once a quarter. You find flower arranging classes there. If you haven't learned how to arrange flower, you can learn how to arrange flowers. It's not only flowers. What I'm effectively saying is that there's so many things you may not have had the time or had the knowledge about in your earlier years. Learn something because you can then be useful to someone else in your latter years. And I am sure that you will all tap into the groups that we have here in CFT. We have Anna in the Temple. We have Shiloh Pillars. We have Tabernacle Women. We have, I know that at retirement you don't qualify for Joanna, so let's leave that. We have Susannas. With the men, the flag bearers are coming up because this pertains to men and women, isn't it? We have protocol, it's only men, but men who are getting to that stage, even the leader of protocol is 65 or something or above, but he stands straight. So when you get to that stage, tap into that group. You know the reason why I'm saying tap into groups in CFT? Because you then create another network. You interact with people in that group whilst you are conducting your service and giving your service to the Lord. But beyond that, we have business groups. We have the Women of Royal Destiny. We don't talk only about spiritual things. We are taught the scripture, but we are taught also the things that we need for life. So if you tap into any of the groups in the church, if you are not in any group or you don't participate, you just come to church, listen to the message, go home, you are missing out. And then if you are at that stage, well, yes, you may have grandchildren you're looking after, but you still have enough time to do something, to contribute to someone else, to give back to society, to give to God what you have not been able to give at that time when you were rushing around doing things. And I am sure that God will bless you abundantly. Even in this time, I know that all the things I've talked about are facts of life. But the important thing is that, as you have heard tonight, if you found one thing amongst all of the things that I said useful, I would encourage you to please hold on to it and implement it. One of the worst enemies that we have is procrastination. You know, some people will go away and say, yes, I heard that, I'm going to go and do it. And then they forget when they get home, or 2 days after you forget. So please don't forget whatever you have decided you are going to work with. Those of you who are in retirement already, the Lord will strengthen your bones and He will also strengthen your organs. The things that He has purposed for you to do even in this time of your retirement, you will fulfill them. Any plan that God has for you to complete whilst you're on the face of the earth that you have not entered into, in this time God will help you to enter into it, so that on that day when you leave and pass, you will with pride, when you stand before Him and He's testing your work, be able to pass the test in Jesus' name. God bless you and thank you very much for listening.